Welcome, and thank you for joining me tonight. You are listening to Mindleapic, a quiet place where gentle history stories help you relax, slow down, and drift softly toward sleep. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Perhaps dim the lights around you. Adjust your pillow. Let your shoulders relax. If you enjoy calm historical journeys like this one, you might consider liking the video and subscribing to Mindleapic. It helps the channel grow and allows more peaceful stories to find people who need them. And if you feel like it, leave a comment telling us which city or country you are listening from tonight. It is always comforting to imagine listeners from many quiet bedrooms around the world, all settling down for rest together. Now, take a slow breath in and let it gently go. Tonight, we will travel back in time to a small village in the 14th century, somewhere in medieval Europe. It is a quiet place of narrow dirt roads, small timber houses, and fields stretching softly beyond the village edge. Most people in this village sleep through the night, but not everyone. While the villagers rest under wool blankets and the moon slowly crosses the sky, one house remains awake. Inside that building, warm light flickers, a fire quietly crackles, and the smell of bread slowly fills the cool night air. Because in medieval villages, bakers worked while everyone else slept, and tonight, we will spend a peaceful night with one of them. It is late evening in the village. The last bits of sunset have faded behind the hills, leaving the sky deep blue and calm. Most homes are quiet now. Wooden doors have been closed. Candles have been blown out. Only a few faint lights remain glowing behind small shuttered windows. The village itself is simple. A narrow road curves between houses made from timber frames and pale plaster walls. Roofs are covered with thick straw thatch. Small gardens sit beside many homes, where herbs and vegetables grow during warmer months. Beyond the village stretch long fields. During the day, these fields are full of movement. Farmers walk slowly behind oxen pulling plows. Children carry baskets of vegetables. Geese wander and honk softly near the road. But now, at night, everything is still. A light breeze moves across the grass, somewhere far away. An owl calls once, then becomes quiet again. Inside the homes, villagers sleep in heavy wooden beds filled with straw mattresses. Thick wool blankets keep them warm against the night air. But one building near the center of the village is different. A warm glow shines through a small window. This is the village bakery, and inside, the baker has already begun his long night. The baker's name is Thomas. Thomas is not young anymore, though he still moves with steady strength. His hands are large and dusted with flour almost all the time. His clothes often carry the warm smell of grain and smoke from the oven fire. He has been a baker for many years. In fact, he learned the work as a boy. His father was a baker, and his father's father before him. In medieval villages, many skills passed quietly from one generation to the next. Farming families taught their children to farm. Blacksmiths trained their sons to shape iron, and bakers taught their children the careful rhythm of flour, water, fire, and patience. Thomas learned that rhythm early in life, and now, every night, while the village sleeps, he continues the same slow routine. The bakery itself is a simple building. The walls are thick, made from timber beams filled with pale clay. The floor is packed earth, smooth from years of footsteps. Near one wall stands the most important part of the bakery, a large stone oven. It is round and wide, built from heavy bricks and clay. The mouth of the oven opens like a dark cave where glowing coals rest deep inside. During the day, the oven is quiet, but at night, it comes alive. Thomas is standing beside it now. He kneels slowly and pushes more pieces of dry wood into the fire. The wood catches gently. Flames grow brighter. Inside the oven, the heat begins to build again. Bread needs strong heat to bake well. The oven must warm for a long time before the first loaves can go inside. So the baker begins early, very early, often around midnight. While the moon is high above the village, Thomas begins his work. A wooden table stands in the center of the bakery. The table is worn smooth by years of kneading dough. On it rests a large wooden bowl filled with coarse flour made from ground wheat. The flour is not as white and fine as modern flour. Medieval flour is darker. Sometimes it contains small pieces of bran from the grain. Sometimes the grind is uneven, but it still makes good bread. Thomas pours water slowly into the bowl. Then he adds a small piece of sourdough starter. In medieval villages, bakers did not use packaged yeast. Instead, they kept a living mixture of flour and water that slowly captured wild yeast from the air. The starter is precious. Thomas protects it carefully. Every day, he saves a small portion of dough to keep the starter alive. Without it, the bread would not rise. He begins mixing the dough. His hands move slowly through the bowl. Flour, water, starter. The mixture thickens gradually. The room is warm now from the oven fire. Outside the bakery, the night remains cool and quiet. But inside, there is gentle movement. Thomas lifts the dough and folds it again and again. Press, fold, turn, press again. The rhythm is calm and steady. Baking bread is not rushed work. It asks for patience. The dough must be kneaded long enough to become soft and strong. So Thomas works slowly. The only sounds in the bakery are the soft thump of dough against wood and the quiet crackle of fire inside the oven. Hours pass gently in this way. Outside, the stars continue their slow journey across the sky. Most villagers remain deep in sleep, but the baker continues his quiet work, because by morning, the entire village will need bread. Bread is the center of nearly every meal in the 14th century. Farmers eat it with cheese. Children dip it into soup. Workers carry it into the fields wrapped in cloth. Without fresh bread, the day feels incomplete. So the baker works through the night, and as the dough slowly rises beside the warm oven, the first hint of morning begins its quiet journey toward the sleeping village. But there are still many hours before sunrise, and the slow rhythm of the medieval bakery continues. The dough rests quietly on the wooden table. Thomas has covered it with a soft cloth made from rough linen. Beneath the cloth, the dough slowly begins its gentle work. Tiny, living yeast inside the mixture wakes and begins to breathe. Very slowly, very quietly, the dough begins to rise. This rising cannot be hurried. In the 14th century, there are no clocks hanging on the wall to measure minutes. Time is felt instead through habit, through experience, and through the quiet. Understanding that comes from doing the same task night after night. Thomas knows the dough will take time, so while it rests, he continues with other work inside the warm bakery. The oven fire must be carefully watched. He steps toward the great stone oven again and crouches beside the opening. The glow from inside paints soft orange light across the walls of the room. He uses a long wooden tool to shift the burning logs deeper into the oven. Sparks lift gently upward and disappear into the dark chimney above. The oven must grow very hot before the bread goes inside. In medieval baking, the baker does not keep the fire burning while the bread cooks. Instead, the oven is heated with wood for many hours. When the bricks and stones have absorbed enough heat, the fire and ashes are swept away. Then the loaves are placed inside the empty oven, where the stored heat bakes them slowly. This method requires patience and careful judgment. Too little heat, and the bread will remain pale and soft. Too much heat, and the crust will darken too quickly. Thomas learned these small details many years ago. standing beside his father in another bakery not far from this village. He remembers those nights sometimes. As a young boy, he would wake in the deep hours of night, rubbing sleep from his eyes as he followed his father into the bakery. The world outside would be dark and silent, just as it is tonight. At first he only watched, then slowly. He learned how to knead the dough until it felt smooth, how to judge the warmth of the oven by placing a careful hand near its opening, how to listen to the quiet sounds of rising bread. These lessons came slowly, night after night, and now they live quietly in his hands. The bakery smells warm and comforting. Flour dust floats softly through the air, glowing faintly in the firelight. On one shelf rest several wooden bowls filled with grain. Some are wheat, some are rye. Sometimes barley is used when harvests are poor. Different grains make slightly different breads. Wheat bread is lighter and softer. Many villagers prefer it when they can afford it. Rye bread is darker and heavier. It fills the stomach well and stays fresh longer. Thomas often bakes both kinds. He must think about the needs of many different people in the village. The miller will arrive early in the morning for several loaves. The innkeeper will need bread for travelers. Families will come with baskets to collect their daily portion. And sometimes a farmer might bring grain to the bakery and ask Thomas to bake bread from it in the large oven. The oven is one of the few in the village large enough for many loaves at once. Because of this, the bakery becomes an important place in village life. But tonight, it is quiet. No voices, no footsteps, only the slow breathing of the fire. Thomas lifts the cloth covering the dough. The surface has changed slightly. It has grown rounder, softer, gently rising upward. He presses a finger into the dough. The small dent slowly fills again. Yes, it is ready. Now begins the next step. He spreads more flour across the wooden table. The fine powder falls like pale snow across the surface. Then he lifts the dough carefully from the bowl and places it on the table. It stretches slowly as it moves, soft and heavy. He divides it into smaller pieces using a simple wooden scraper. Each piece will become a loaf. Some are shaped round, some long. Some are smaller loaves for individual households. Others are larger, meant to be shared by entire families. Thomas works slowly and steadily. He folds each piece of dough and rolls it gently beneath his hands. Turn, press, turn again. The dough becomes smooth and round. He places each shaped loaf on a wooden board dusted with flour. Soon the boards begin to fill. One row of loaves, then another, each one resting quietly while it rises again. This second rise is also important. Without it, the bread would be dense and heavy. So once again, there is waiting. The night continues. Outside the bakery, the village sleeps peacefully. Clouds drift slowly across the moon. A dog, somewhere in the distance, shifts in its sleep and gives a small bark. Beyond the houses, fields lie dark beneath the sky. The wheat that grew there months ago has already been harvested, ground into flour at the village mill, and carried here to become bread. Everything in the village is connected in this way. Farmers grow the grain, millers grind it, and bakers transform it into food. Each person depends on the others. The rhythm of the village moves slowly, like the turning of seasons. Spring planting, summer growth, autumn harvest, winter quiet. And through all these seasons, the bakery fire burns many nights. Thomas steps outside the bakery for a moment. The air is cool and fresh after the warmth inside. He breathes slowly. Above him, the sky is full of stars. In the distance stands the small church at the center of the village. Its wooden bell tower rises above the rooftops. In a few hours, the bell will ring. The bell marks many moments of village life. Morning prayer, midday rest, evening quiet. The sound carries across the fields and through the narrow roads between houses. But for now, the bell remains silent. Thomas looks up at the sky. He has watched these stars many nights while waiting for dough to rise. Without clocks or watches, people often judge time by the position of the moon or the stars. He can tell that the deepest part of night has already passed. Morning will come, slowly but surely, and before the first rooster calls, the first loaves must be ready. He returns inside. The oven now glows with deep heat. The wood has burned down to thick red coals. Using a long iron rake, Thomas carefully pulls the remaining coals forward. Then he sweeps them out of the oven onto a stone area beside the hearth. The oven floor is now clear, but the bricks inside hold the heat from hours of fire. The air around the oven shimmers slightly from warmth. Now it is time. Thomas lifts the first wooden board of risen loaves. Each loaf has grown larger. The dough feels light beneath his hands. One by one, he uses a long wooden peel to slide the loaves deep into the oven. The movement is smooth and practiced. Slide forward. Place the loaf. Draw the peel back. Another loaf. Then another. Soon the oven is filled with rows of quiet bread. He closes the heavy wooden door. Inside the dark oven, the bread begins its slow transformation. Dough becomes bread through heat and time. And while the village still sleeps, the first loaves of morning begin to bake. The bakery grows quieter again. The oven door is closed now, and inside the warm stone chamber the loaves are slowly baking. Nothing moves quickly here. Bread does not rush. It changes slowly, gently, almost silently, as the heat of the oven begins to do its work. Inside the loaves, small pockets of air grow wider. The soft dough becomes firmer. The outside begins to form a crust that will soon turn golden brown. But this takes time, so Thomas waits. Waiting is a large part of a baker's night. There are moments of mixing and kneading, moments of shaping dough, moments of tending the fire, and then there are these long, quiet spaces in between. He wipes a small layer of flour from the table, using a simple brush made from stiff plant fibers. The flour falls softly onto the floor. In the morning, it will be swept away along with the ashes and small bits of dough left behind from the night's work. The bakery is never perfectly clean, but it is always carefully kept. Thomas believes a bakery should feel warm and welcoming, even if it is simple. He moves slowly around the room, adjusting tools and setting wooden boards back onto their shelves. On one wall hangs a collection of long wooden paddles used for the oven. Another hook holds a cloth sack of grain. In the corner sits a large wooden barrel filled with water carried earlier from the village well. Everything has its place, and everything waits quietly until it is needed again. The night air slips gently through a small opening in the wall. It carries faint sounds from outside the village. Very far away, perhaps near the edge of the forest, an owl calls again, a low and lonely sound. Then silence returns. Thomas sits for a moment on a short wooden stool beside the oven. The warmth from the bricks reaches his back. It is comforting after standing for so long. Many nights he spends almost the entire dark hours awake, moving between the table and the fire. It is tiring work, but it is familiar work, and familiar work often feels peaceful. He has known this rhythm for most of his life. If someone from another time could step into the bakery now, they might feel surprised by how calm it is. In modern bakeries, there are machines that mix dough quickly. Electric ovens heat in minutes. Bright lights shine across stainless steel tables. But here, in a 14th century village, everything moves slowly. Dough is mixed by hand. Firewood must be gathered and carried. Ovens must be heated patiently over many hours. Even the flour itself arrives slowly. After harvest season, grain is taken to the village mill. The mill wheel turns steadily in the stream nearby, powered only by moving water. Inside the mill, heavy stones grind the grain into flour. The process is steady and slow, just like the work in the bakery. Thomas stands again and walks toward the oven door. He does not open it yet. Instead, he places his hand close to the wood, not touching, just feeling the warmth. He has learned to judge the progress of baking by small signs: the smell of the bread, the warmth of the oven door, even the quiet sounds from inside. Sometimes a loaf will crack slightly as the crust forms, a soft sound, almost like a whisper. Tonight, the smell begins to change. At first, it was simply warm dough, but now the air fills slowly with the comforting scent of baking bread. It is a smell that belongs deeply to village life. The smell drifts out through the small window and into the cool night air. Soon it will reach the road. By early morning, villagers walking toward the well or the fields will notice it, and they will know the bakery is awake. Thomas opens the oven door carefully. A wave of warm air moves gently into the room. Inside the oven, the loaves sit quietly on the hot stone floor. Their shapes have grown fuller. Their surfaces are turning a deep golden color. He studies them for a moment. Not all loaves bake at exactly the same speed. Some are closer to the hottest part of the oven. Others sit nearer the entrance. He uses the long wooden peel again to shift a few loaves slightly. Then he closes the door once more. Soon they will be ready. Outside, the night slowly begins to change. It is still dark, but the darkness has softened. The deepest hours of night have passed. Somewhere in the village, a rooster stirs in its wooden coop. It does not crow yet, but it is awake now, shifting its feathers and preparing for morning. In one of the small houses near the bakery, a farmer turns in his bed. His day will begin early. Fields must be checked. Animals must be fed. But for now, he sleeps a little longer. The baker, meanwhile, continues his quiet watch. Thomas moves to the wooden boards where more shaped dough waits. These loaves are still rising. They will bake in the second round once the first batch is finished. He lifts the cloth covering them. The dough has grown slightly larger again. Each loaf looks soft and calm, like small sleeping pillows of dough. He presses one gently. It slowly springs back. Yes, they are rising well. He covers them again and returns to the oven. The smell of bread grows stronger now. Warm, nutty, comforting. It fills the bakery and drifts softly into the cool air outside. If someone walked along the quiet road right now, they would notice it immediately. The smell of fresh bread has a way of making people feel calm and hungry at the same time, even in the middle of the night. Thomas opens the oven again. This time he smiles slightly. The loaves are ready. Their crusts are rich and brown. Small cracks have formed along the surface where the bread expanded during baking. Using the long peel, he lifts the first loaf from the oven. It makes a soft hollow sound when tapped. A good sign. He places it onto a wooden rack beside the table. Then another loaf, and another. Soon the rack begins to fill with warm bread. The crusts crackle quietly as they cool, a gentle sound that bakers know well. Steam rises faintly from the loaves. Inside, the bread is still soft and hot. It must rest before anyone can slice it. Fresh bread needs time to settle, just as dough needed time to rise. Thomas looks at the growing row of loaves. Soon the village will wake. Children will step outside their homes. Farmers will lead animals toward the fields. Smoke will rise from small chimneys as morning fires are lit. And when the villagers arrive at the bakery door, the bread will be ready, warm, simple, and made during the quiet hours when the rest of the world slept. The first loaves now rest on the wooden racks. They sit quietly in long rows. their crusts slowly cooling in the warm air of the bakery. Every few moments a soft sound can be heard, a gentle crackle. It comes from the crust as it tightens and settles. Bakers know this quiet sound well. It is one of the small signs that the bread has baked properly. Thomas moves slowly along the rack, looking carefully at each loaf. He does not rush this moment. Each loaf represents many small steps that began hours earlier in the night. Mixing, kneading, waiting, shaping, rising, and finally baking in the deep heat of the stone oven. Now the bread rests, just as the baker rested briefly earlier beside the oven. Everything in the bakery follows a rhythm of work and pause, movement and stillness. The oven, however, is not finished yet. It still holds a great deal of heat inside its thick walls, and there are many more loaves waiting to be baked. Thomas returns to the table where the second group of dough rests beneath linen cloths. He lifts the cloth gently. The loaves have risen beautifully. Each one has expanded softly, becoming light and rounded. The dough feels airy when he presses it lightly with his finger. Yes, they are ready. He dusts a little more flour onto the wooden peel. Then he lifts the first loaf carefully. The dough stretches slightly as it moves. With steady hands, he slides it into the oven. One loaf, then another. The movements are smooth and practiced. Forward, slide, withdraw. Again. Soon, the second round of bread rests inside the oven. Thomas closes the heavy door once more. The quiet baking begins again. Outside the bakery, the night sky has begun to change. The stars are still visible, but they are not as bright as before. Far on the eastern horizon, the darkness has softened into a faint gray-blue glow. Morning is still some time away, but the earth has already begun to turn slowly toward the sun. In the village streets, the air feels cooler now. A thin mist has settled over the fields beyond the houses. The thatched roofs of the cottages glisten faintly with early dew. Everything remains peaceful. The village sleeps, but the bakery continues its quiet work. Thomas steps outside again for a few moments. The cool air feels refreshing against his face after the warmth of the oven. He stretches his shoulders gently. Baking through the night requires long hours of standing, bending, lifting, but the calm rhythm of the work makes the hours pass quietly. He looks down the narrow village road. The ground is uneven and packed from many footsteps and cartwheels. During the day, it is busy with movement. Farmers leading oxen, children carrying baskets, travelers stopping at the small inn near the village center. But now the road lies still beneath the fading stars. A faint glow of light spills from the bakery window behind him. The smell of fresh bread drifts softly through the air. If someone passed by now, they would know immediately that morning bread is being prepared. In many medieval villages, bread is more than just food. It is the center of nearly every meal. People eat bread with stew, with cheese, with vegetables, sometimes simply with butter or a little salt. Bread fills the stomach and gives energy for the long hours of work in the fields. Because of this, the village baker carries an important responsibility. If bread is late, the whole morning feels different. If bread is poorly made, people notice. But when the bread is warm, fresh, and plentiful, the day begins smoothly. Thomas has always taken this responsibility seriously, even when he feels tired during the deepest hours of night. He continues carefully. Because the village depends on these loaves, he returns inside the bakery. The second batch of bread continues baking quietly. Thomas uses the time to prepare for the morning visitors. He gathers several woven baskets from a shelf along the wall. The baskets are made from flexible willow branches. They are strong but light, perfect for carrying several loaves at once. Some villagers will bring their own baskets. Others will borrow the bakery baskets for a short walk home. Thomas lines a few baskets with cloth. This keeps the bread warm and prevents crumbs from falling through the woven spaces. He places several finished loaves gently into the first basket. The bread is still warm, and the comforting smell fills the room again. Soon the baskets begin to fill. The first rooster finally crows. The sound comes from somewhere near the edge of the village, a clear, proud call that breaks the long silence of night. Thomas pauses for a moment and listens. Soon another rooster answers from a different farmyard. Then another. It is one of the oldest signals of morning in village life. Roosters often wake before the sun rises. Their calls spread slowly across the fields and through the narrow streets between houses. In many homes, villagers begin to stir when they hear them. Morning is approaching. The sky outside grows slowly brighter. The deep blue of night fades into softer shades of gray and pale silver. Mist drifts gently across the nearby fields. Inside the bakery, the oven door opens once more. The second batch of bread is ready. Again, the warm air rolls into the room. Thomas lifts each loaf carefully and places it on the cooling racks. More soft, crackling sounds begin as the crusts adjust to the cooler air. The racks are nearly full now, golden loaves resting side by side. Simple, wholesome, ready for the village. Not long from now, the first villagers will begin to appear. Perhaps a farmer on his way to the fields. Perhaps the innkeeper collecting bread for travelers. Perhaps a child sent by their parents with a small basket. But for a few more quiet moments, the bakery belongs only to the baker. The long night of work is nearly finished. Morning is slowly arriving, and the smell of fresh bread is ready to greet the waking village. Morning continues to arrive slowly over the village. The sky in the east is now pale gray, with a faint wash of soft pink beginning to appear above the distant fields. The stars are fading one by one, quietly disappearing into the growing light. Inside the bakery, the warm glow of the fire has softened. The oven has already given much of its heat to the loaves that baked through the night. Still, the thick stone walls hold warmth, and the room remains comfortable despite the cool air outside. Rows of bread now rest on the wooden racks. Some loaves are round and wide, others are long and narrow. A few are darker rye loaves with thicker crusts. Together, they fill the bakery with the rich smell of freshly baked bread. Thomas moves slowly along the racks. He turns a few loaves gently, checking that they cool evenly. Steam still rises faintly from the crusts, though the bread is no longer as hot as it was moments ago. Soon it will be ready for the villagers. But there are still small tasks to finish before the bakery opens its door. Thomas begins to tidy the work table again. Flour dust covers the wooden surface in a pale layer. He brushes it into a small wooden bowl. Some of this flour can still be used later in the day when more dough is prepared. Nothing in the bakery is wasted if it can be used again. In medieval villages, food is precious. Every grain of wheat requires many months of careful work in the fields. Planting in spring, growing under the warm summer sun, harvesting in early autumn. Then threshing, drying, and carrying the grain to the mill. Only after all this work does it become flour. So the baker treats every handful with care. He sweeps the earthen floor near the oven, gathering small pieces of ash and crumbs. The broom he uses is simple, made from tied bundles of straw. It makes a soft brushing sound as it moves across the packed earth floor. Cleaning the bakery is part of the quiet morning routine. Soon people will arrive, and the room should feel welcoming. Thomas pauses for a moment and listens. Outside, the village is beginning to wake. A door creaks open somewhere down the road. Wood shifts as a farmer lifts the latch of a small animal pen. A cow gives a low, sleepy sound as it stands. These small noises are the early sounds of village life beginning, again after the long night. The smell of bread drifts gently from the bakery window. It travels slowly along the cool morning air. A young boy walking along the road toward the well suddenly stops and looks toward the bakery. He knows that smell. Everyone in the village knows it. Fresh bread means morning has truly begun. The boy smiles quietly and continues down the road, carrying his empty bucket. Soon he will return with water for his family, and perhaps he will stop by the bakery afterward with a basket. Thomas places several loaves into the prepared baskets. He arranges them carefully so the crusts do not press too tightly together. Bread must breathe as it cools. If it is packed too closely, the crust becomes soft. These are small details, but bakers learn them over many years of quiet work. Soon, 3 baskets are filled. More loaves remain on the racks. He will refill the baskets again when the first ones are taken. Light now touches the roofs of the houses. The sky grows brighter by the minute. Mist still rests over the nearby fields, but it begins to thin as the morning air warms. From the direction of the church, the bell finally rings. A deep, steady tone spreads across the village. One slow bell, then another, the morning bell. It tells the villagers that the day has begun. Farmers begin preparing their tools. Children rub sleep from their eyes. Fires are lit in hearths, and soon many people will walk along the narrow road that leads past the bakery. Thomas opens the bakery door for the first time this morning. Cool, fresh air flows into the warm room. The early sunlight is still soft, casting long, pale shadows along the road. For a moment, he simply stands in the doorway. After working through the night, the quiet light of morning always feels peaceful. He watches as the village slowly comes to life. A farmer leads 2 oxen down the road toward the fields. A woman walks toward the well with a wooden bucket. A small group of geese wander slowly between the houses, softly honking as they search the ground for bits of food. The village is not large. Most people know one another, and many of them know the baker well. Before long, the first customer appears. It is the miller. He walks slowly along the road, carrying a cloth sack over his shoulder. His work at the mill will begin soon, and he always stops by the bakery first. "Good morning, Thomas," he says with a friendly nod. Thomas returns the greeting and lifts the lid of one basket. Warm bread waits inside. The miller chooses several round loaves and places them into his sack. The smell rises warmly into the morning air. Fresh bread for the start of a long day beside the turning mill wheel. The exchange is simple: bread for a few coins, and sometimes for a little flour. In small villages, trade often moves in quiet circles like this. Soon more villagers arrive. A woman carrying a woven basket. A young boy sent by his mother. An older farmer who always buys the darker rye bread. Each person steps inside the bakery for a moment. They greet the baker. They choose their loaves, and then they continue on with the start of their day. The bakery becomes a small gathering place during these early morning moments. Soft voices, friendly nods, the warm smell of bread filling the room. Thomas feels a quiet satisfaction as he watches the baskets slowly empty and refill. The long night of work has done its purpose. While the village slept, the bakery remained awake. Flour became dough. Dough became bread. And now that bread moves out into the waking village, ready to become part of many simple meals throughout the day. The rhythm will repeat again tonight. When evening returns and the village grows quiet once more, the baker will begin again, mixing, kneading, waiting, working through the peaceful hours of darkness so that fresh bread will greet the morning. The morning light grows stronger over the village. Soft gold sunlight begins to spread across the thatched rooftops and narrow dirt roads. The mist that rested over the fields slowly lifts, revealing long rows of farmland stretching quietly into the distance. Inside the bakery, the gentle activity of the morning continues. Several villagers have already come and gone, their baskets filled with warm bread. They returned to their homes or walked toward the fields where the day's work is beginning. Thomas moves calmly between the racks and the baskets. Whenever a basket becomes empty, he refills it with fresh loaves from the cooling racks. The bread is now warm rather than hot, making it easier to carry. The smell of bread still fills the room. It mixes with the faint scent of wood smoke from the oven and the clean, dry smell of flour that rests on the wooden table. For many people in the village, this smell has become one of the quiet comforts of daily life. Outside, the road grows more active. A farmer passes, leading a small cart pulled by a patient donkey. The cart wheels creak softly as they roll across the uneven road. A group of children walk together toward the edge of the village, laughing quietly as they carry small baskets for gathering eggs from nearby farms. The village is fully awake now, yet the pace of life remains slow and steady. There are no loud machines, no rushing crowds, just footsteps, voices, and the quiet sounds of animals beginning their day. Inside the bakery, the last loaves from the night's baking are cooling. Thomas checks them carefully. He lifts one loaf and taps gently on the bottom of the crust. The hollow sound tells him the bread baked properly. This is a simple test bakers have used for many centuries. It requires no tools, only experience. He places the loaf into another basket. Soon the racks will be empty, but the bakery will not stay quiet for long. Later today, more dough will be prepared. The process begins again each afternoon so that the dough will be ready for the next night's baking. The rhythm never truly stops. It moves forward day after day, season after season. Near the bakery doorway, a young girl appears holding a small woven basket. She looks inside shyly before stepping across the threshold. Thomas recognizes her immediately. Her family lives near the village well. She comes most mornings to collect bread. "Good morning," Thomas says gently. The girl smiles and places her basket on the table. She chooses 2 small round loaves. They are still slightly warm. The smell makes her smile again. For many children in the village, fresh bread is one of the happiest parts of the morning. Thomas wraps the loaves in a cloth and places them carefully in her basket. She thanks him politely and walks back out into the growing daylight. By now, the sun has risen fully above the distant fields. Golden light spreads across the village. Shadows shorten. Birds flutter between rooftops and nearby trees. The morning bell from the church has already rung once, and soon it will ring again to mark the passing hours. Time in the village moves with these simple signals: the bell, the rising sun, the changing position of shadows across the ground. Few people own clocks, but everyone understands the rhythm of the day. The bakery gradually becomes quieter again. The early morning visitors have mostly come and gone. Most villagers are now busy with their daily work. Fields must be tended, animals must be fed, water must be carried, tools must be repaired. Bread travels with them into these tasks. A farmer may tuck a loaf into a cloth bag before heading to the fields. A mother may slice bread beside a pot of warm morning stew. Children may carry pieces with cheese or honey as they walk. The bread baked during the quiet hours of night now becomes part of many different meals throughout the village. Thomas sits for a short moment beside the table. The long night of work is finally finished. His hands still carry traces of flour. His clothes smell faintly of smoke from the oven fire. But there is a calm satisfaction in this quiet pause. The bakery shelves hold fewer loaves now. Most of the bread has already found its way into baskets and hands. Soon, Thomas will rest for a few hours. Bakers in medieval villages often sleep during part of the morning after their night of work. The rhythm of their lives is slightly different from others in the village. While most people sleep through the night, the baker remains awake. And while many villagers begin their work at sunrise, the baker often finishes his. Before leaving the bakery for his rest, Thomas prepares a few things for later. He gathers the remaining flour and stores it carefully in covered containers. He checks the sourdough starter resting in its small wooden bowl. The starter must be fed again with fresh flour and water so it will stay alive and ready for tomorrow's bread. This small mixture is one of the bakery's most important treasures. Some starters are kept alive for many years, passed quietly from one baker to the next. Thomas stirs the mixture gently and adds a small handful of flour. Soon it will begin its quiet bubbling again. Tiny, living yeast, continuing its patient work. He looks once more around the bakery. The oven now rests after its long night of heat. The racks are nearly empty. The baskets sit quietly near the door. Sunlight now fills the room where candlelight and fire once glowed during the dark hours. The transformation from night to morning is complete, and with it, the baker's work for this cycle is finished. But tonight, when the village once again grows quiet and the moon rises above the rooftops, the warm light will return to the bakery window. The fire will glow again inside the stone oven, and the slow, peaceful rhythm of the medieval baker will begin once more. Late morning settles gently over the village. The sun now stands comfortably above the rooftops, casting warm light across the narrow road that passes the bakery. The early rush of villagers collecting bread has faded, and the street grows quieter again. Most people are now busy with their daily work. In the fields beyond the houses, farmers guide their oxen through the soil. The slow pull of the plow cuts long lines through the earth. It is steady work, done carefully and without hurry. From time to time, the distant sound of metal, striking metal, can be heard from the blacksmith's workshop. Clang, pause, clang again. The blacksmith shapes horseshoes and tools that farmers will use throughout the day. Village life moves forward like this: slow, steady, and connected. And though the bakery is quieter now, it still holds the gentle warmth of the long night's work. Inside the bakery, Thomas prepares to close the door for a few hours of rest. Bakers rarely sleep through the entire night. Instead, their rest often comes in short, quiet periods during the day. After many hours beside the oven fire, sleep arrives easily. But before leaving the bakery, there are still a few final tasks to complete. He walks toward the oven and looks inside. The floor of the oven is now empty. Only faint warmth remains in the thick bricks. Later in the day, the oven will be cleaned more carefully to prepare for the next night's baking. Ashes from the fire must be gathered. Small bits of burned wood must be removed. A baker learns to keep the oven in good condition, because it is the heart of the bakery. Without the oven, the bakery would be only a quiet room filled with flour. Thomas lifts a long-handled brush made from stiff twigs. He gently sweeps the inside of the oven floor, gathering loose ash into a small pile. The ash will later be carried outside and scattered, where it can be useful in gardens. Even the remains of the fire can serve a purpose. Nothing in village life is wasted if it can still be used. When the oven is clean, he closes the heavy wooden door. For now, the oven rests. Tonight it will wake again. Sunlight now fills the bakery completely. The warm morning rays shine through the small window and stretch across the wooden table. In the daylight, the room looks simple but welcoming. The tools hanging on the wall cast long shadows. The flour containers sit quietly on their shelves, and the empty racks which only hours ago were full of bread, now wait patiently for the next batch of loaves. The smell of fresh bread still lingers in the air. It will remain for many hours. Sometimes villagers passing by will pause for a moment outside the bakery, breathing in that familiar scent. It is one of the comforting smells of village life. Thomas steps outside and closes the bakery door behind him. The warm sunlight touches his face. After spending so many hours in the gentle glow of the oven fire, the brightness of day feels almost surprising. He walks slowly along the narrow path toward his small home nearby. The baker's house is not far from the bakery. In many villages, bakers live very close to their ovens. This allows them to return quickly when the night work begins again. As he walks, he passes several villagers working outside their homes. A woman spreads laundry across a wooden fence. Two children chase each other through the grass, laughing quietly. A farmer repairs a wooden cartwheel beside his barn. Each person nods politely to the baker as he passes. Everyone knows that while they were sleeping, he was awake preparing the bread that now sits on their tables. Near the well at the center of the village, several women gather with buckets and wooden pails. They lower ropes into the cool, dark water and lift them again slowly. Water splashes gently into their containers. The well is another quiet meeting place in village life. Here people share small pieces of news. They speak softly about the weather, about the harvest, about small events in the village. This morning, the smell of fresh bread still drifts faintly through the air. One woman smiles and says, "The baker had a good fire last night." Another nods in agreement. Good bread is always noticed. Thomas reaches his home and steps inside. The room is small but comfortable. A wooden bed stands beside the wall. A small table holds a clay cup and a simple bowl. On the shelf sits a small loaf of bread he kept for himself. Even the baker saves a little from each batch. He pours water into the cup and tears a piece from the loaf. The bread is still slightly warm, soft inside, with a crust that crackles gently as he breaks it. For the baker, this quiet moment is part of the reward of the night's work. After eating, he finally rests. The village outside continues its daily rhythm. Carts roll slowly along the road. Voices rise and fall in the distance. Birds flutter between trees. But inside the small house, the baker sleeps. The long night beside the oven has earned this rest. His sleep is deep and calm, and while he rests, the bread he baked travels through the village. A farmer eats a slice while resting beside his field. Children share pieces with cheese near the well. At the inn, travelers dip bread into bowls of warm stew, the work done quietly during the dark. Ours now supports the life of the entire village. The sun continues its slow journey across the sky. Morning becomes midday, and though the bakery door is closed for now, everyone in the village knows that when evening returns and shadows grow long again, the baker will wake, the oven will be lit, and the gentle rhythm of flour, fire, and patience will begin once more. The afternoon sun now rests high above the village. Warm light spreads across the fields, the rooftops, and the narrow dirt paths that wind between the homes. The mist that covered the land earlier in the morning has long since disappeared, leaving the sky wide and clear. The village moves through its quiet midday rhythm. In the fields, farmers pause briefly from their work. Some sit beneath the shade of a tree. Others rest beside their carts or lean against wooden fences. Many of them take out small bundles wrapped in cloth. Inside these bundles is the same simple food they have eaten for generations. Bread, sometimes a piece of cheese, perhaps a small onion or a handful of dried fruit. Farmer breaks open a loaf baked only hours earlier in the quiet darkness of the bakery. The crust cracks softly, and the inside remains tender. He eats slowly, looking across the wide field where the wheat once grew, the same wheat that has now become the bread in his hands. This quiet circle, from field to flour to bread, connects the work of many people in the village. Near the center of the village, the bakery remains closed for the afternoon. The wooden door stays shut, and the warm smell of bread slowly fades as the hours pass. Inside, the racks stand empty. The wooden table rests quietly in the sunlight streaming through the window. The great stone oven has cooled now, holding only a faint trace of warmth from the long night of fire. But the bakery is not asleep forever. It is simply resting, just like the baker. Thomas continues his midday rest inside his small home. The quiet room is shaded from the bright afternoon sun. Outside, distant sounds drift through the open window. A cart rolling slowly across the road. The quiet clucking of chickens. The soft hum of village life continuing under the warm sky. But inside, the baker sleeps peacefully. His body is used to this unusual rhythm. While most villagers sleep during the dark hours, his rest comes during the daylight. Years of baking have shaped this pattern into something natural for him. Slowly, the afternoon moves forward. The sun begins its gentle path downward toward the western hills. The light softens again. Shadows grow longer across the ground. Children who spent the morning helping with chores now gather near the open spaces between houses. They play simple games, laughing and running along the dusty paths. The smell of evening cooking fires begins to appear in the air as families prepare their meals. Bread from the morning bakery finds its place again at these tables. Some loaves are sliced beside bowls of vegetable stew. Others are eaten with butter or honey. For many families, bread is the steady center of every meal. As the afternoon continues, Thomas slowly wakes from his rest. The room around him is quiet. Sunlight now enters at a different angle, telling him that many hours have passed. He sits up slowly, stretching his arms after the long sleep. Bakers must rise again before evening fully arrives. The work of the next baking cycle begins long before midnight. The dough must be prepared early so that it has time to rise properly. Thomas washes his hands in a small basin of cool water. Then he steps outside into the soft light of the late afternoon. The air feels warm but gentle now. The village is still busy, though the pace has slowed as people prepare to finish their work for the day. A farmer guides his animals back toward the barns. Women gather vegetables from small garden plots. Children carry bundles of firewood toward their homes. Everyone moves with the quiet understanding that evening is approaching. Thomas walks back toward the bakery. The familiar building waits beside the road. Its door still closed, its windows quiet, but soon the warm light of the oven will return. He unlocks the door and steps inside. The room greets him with calm stillness. The tools hang where he left them. The table waits for flour and dough. The oven rests like a sleeping giant, ready to wake when the fire is lit again. The baker begins preparing for the night ahead. He pours fresh flour into the large wooden bowl. He carries water from the barrel, and from the small covered container. He lifts the sourdough starter he fed. Earlier that morning, the starter has quietly come alive again. Small bubbles appear on its surface, a gentle sign that the wild yeast within it is ready to help the bread rise once more. Thomas mixes the ingredients slowly. Flour, water, starter, the same simple mixture that has been used for centuries. His hands move through the dough with practiced calm. Fold, press, turn. The rhythm begins again. Outside, the sky slowly changes color. The blue fades into soft shades of orange and gold. Birds return to their nests. The village grows quieter as evening meals are prepared. Soon, candles will glow behind the windows of small homes, and before long, darkness will return. When the moon rises above the rooftops once again, the baker will still be working, because while the village sleeps, the bakery will once again come alive with firelight, flour, and the quiet creation of tomorrow's bread. Evening settles slowly over the village. The sun drifts lower behind the distant hills, and the bright colors of late afternoon begin to soften. The golden light that once filled the fields fades gently into warmer shades of orange and pale red. Long shadows stretch across the dirt road that runs past the bakery. Farmers guide their animals back toward their barns. Wooden gates creak softly as they close. The quiet sounds of village life begin to slow. In many homes, small cooking fires are already burning. Thin trails of smoke rise from chimneys and drift into the calm evening air. Inside these homes, families prepare their simple evening meals. And once again, bread sits at the center of the table. The loaves baked during the quiet hours of the previous night are now being shared among many families. A father slices bread beside a pot of vegetable stew. A child spreads a little honey across a warm piece of crust. At the village inn, travelers dip thick pieces of bread into bowls of broth while resting from the day's journey. The bread moves quietly through the village, supporting the small moments of daily life. But while these meals are enjoyed, the baker has already begun preparing the bread for tomorrow. Inside the bakery, the work table is alive again with movement. The large wooden bowl sits in the center of the table, filled with fresh dough that Thomas began mixing earlier. The dough has been kneaded carefully, folded again and again beneath his hands. Now it rests beneath a linen cloth, beginning its slow rise. The sourdough starter within the dough has awakened once more. Tiny living yeast begins its gentle work. Small pockets of air slowly form within the mixture. The dough breathes quietly. This first rise will take several hours, just like the rising that happened during the previous night. The rhythm repeats itself day after day. The bakery is quiet, even quieter than during the deep night hours. Outside, people are still awake in their homes, but inside the bakery, only the baker moves through the room. He prepares the firewood that will soon warm the great stone oven. Bundles of dry wood lean against the wall near the hearth. Thomas selects several pieces and places them neatly beside the oven opening. The fire must be built slowly. Too much wood too quickly would create uneven heat. Instead, the fire grows gradually, warming the heavy stone walls over many hours. This patient heating is one reason medieval bakers must begin their work so early. The oven must be ready long before the bread is placed inside. The evening sky deepens outside the bakery window. The bright colors fade slowly into deep blue. One by one, the first stars appear above the rooftops. Candles glow softly behind the small windows of village homes. The sounds of conversation drift faintly through the cool air. But before long, the village begins to grow quiet again. Families finish their meals. Children grow sleepy. Doors close, and the peaceful stillness of night slowly returns. Inside the bakery, Thomas lights the first small flame in the oven. He kneels carefully beside the opening and places a piece of kindling against the stone floor. The flame catches slowly. It flickers gently in the dark oven chamber. Soon, a second piece of wood begins to burn. Then another. The fire grows patiently. Orange light begins to glow within the oven. The warmth slowly spreads through the thick bricks. This fire will burn for many hours before the first loaves are ready to bake. The dough on the table continues its quiet rise. Thomas lifts the cloth and looks at it carefully. Already the surface has begun to change. The dough feels softer and more alive beneath his fingers. He presses gently. The surface springs back slowly. Yes, the yeast is working well tonight. He covers the bowl again and returns to the fire. The night stretches ahead of him, just as it did yesterday, just as it will tomorrow. The same slow cycle repeating again and again. Outside, the moon now rises above the dark rooftops. Its pale light spreads across the village roads and fields. Most villagers are already asleep beneath thick wool blankets. The animals in their barns rest quietly. The wind moves gently through the tall grasses beyond the village, and through the stillness of the night, one small window continues to glow. The bakery. Inside, the baker moves slowly between the oven and the table. Flour dust drifts softly through the warm air. The fire crackles gently inside the stone chamber. The dough rises patiently beneath its cloth. Everything moves in the familiar rhythm of medieval baking. Hours will pass like this. The oven will grow hotter. The dough will grow larger. Soon it will be divided and shaped into loaves once again. And as the deepest part of night arrives, the bakery will look very much like it did the night before. A warm room filled with firelight, the quiet sound of kneading hands, and the comforting smell of bread slowly filling the air. Because while the village sleeps peacefully under the moon, the baker continues his calm and steady work, preparing the bread that will greet the next morning. Night has settled deeply over the village once again. The moon now stands high above the quiet rooftops, casting pale silver light across the narrow roads and open fields. The same calm silence that filled the night before has returned. Most of the village sleeps. Inside the small timber houses, families rest beneath thick blankets. The cooking fires have burned low, leaving only faint warmth in the hearths. Outside, the air feels cool and still. Only a few soft sounds move through the darkness. The quiet rustle of wind across the tall grass, the distant hoot of an owl somewhere near the edge of the forest, and from the center of the village, the gentle crackle of a fire burning inside the bakery oven. Inside the bakery, the room glows warmly. The fire within the stone oven has grown stronger during the past hours. Bright orange light flickers inside the deep chamber, and the thick brick walls slowly absorb the heat. Thomas kneels beside the oven opening and adds another piece of dry wood. The flame catches quickly. A few small sparks rise and disappear into the dark chimney above. The fire must grow steadily, not too quickly, not too slowly. This careful balance is something bakers learn through years of quiet practice. Each oven behaves a little differently. Some hold heat longer, some warm more quickly. Over time, the baker learns the personality of his oven the same way a farmer learns the soil of his fields. The dough resting on the wooden table has now grown much larger. Thomas lifts the cloth covering the bowl and studies it carefully. The surface has risen softly, forming a rounded shape that fills the bowl. Tiny bubbles beneath the surface show that the yeast has been working quietly. He presses a finger gently into the dough. The small dent slowly fills again. It is ready. Thomas dusts the wooden table with flour. The pale powder spreads across the surface like a thin snowfall. Then he lifts the dough from the bowl. It stretches slowly as it moves, heavy and soft in his hands. He places it on the table and begins dividing it into portions. The wooden scraper moves through the dough with quiet efficiency. One piece, then another. Each portion will soon become a loaf of bread for the village. The shaping of the loaves begins. Thomas rolls the first piece of dough beneath his palms. Press, turn, fold. The dough tightens and forms a smooth, round shape. He places it gently onto a wooden board dusted with flour. Another piece of dough follows, and another. Soon the boards begin to fill with quiet rows of rising loaves. Each loaf rests beneath a cloth while it prepares for baking. This second rise will take time, but the baker is patient. Night provides many hours for this careful process. The oven continues to grow hotter. Thomas checks the fire again. The logs inside have burned down into glowing coals. The heat radiates outward into the room. Warm air shimmers faintly above the oven opening. Soon the fire will have done its work. The coals will be swept aside, and the loaves will enter the hot stone chamber. Outside the bakery window, the village remains peaceful. The moonlight touches the rooftops and quiet roads. No footsteps pass along the street. No voices break the calm air. Only the faint glow of the bakery window shows that someone is still awake. Inside, the baker continues his slow and steady movements, shaping dough, watching the fire, waiting patiently for the right moment. The rhythm is gentle, almost meditative. Press, fold, turn, place the loaf on the board. Then begin again. Hours pass quietly. The loaves beneath the cloth grow slightly larger. The oven reaches its full heat. Thomas finally sweeps the glowing coals from the oven floor using a long iron rake. The stones inside the oven now hold deep, powerful warmth. He lifts the first board of risen loaves. One by one, he slides them into the oven using the long wooden peel. The movement is practiced and smooth. Each loaf settles onto the hot stone floor. Soon, the oven is filled again with rows of bread. The heavy wooden door closes. Inside, the loaves begin their slow transformation once more. Dough becoming bread, just as it did the night before, just as it will again tomorrow. The smell of baking bread slowly fills the bakery. Warm, comforting, familiar. It drifts softly out through the small window and into the cool night air. Far away, a rooster shifts quietly in its sleep. Soon, morning will begin its slow return to the village. And when the first villagers step onto the road at dawn, the bread will already be waiting, fresh, golden, and baked during the peaceful hours when the rest of the world slept. The loaves bake quietly inside the oven. Behind the thick wooden door, the heat surrounds them from every side. The warm stone floor beneath the bread holds the deep heat gathered during many hours of fire. Inside the dough, small changes are happening. Air pockets slowly grow wider. The soft dough becomes firm, and the crust begins to form along the outside of each loaf. These changes happen slowly and patiently. Bread does not hurry, and the baker does not hurry either. Thomas stands near the oven, listening. Years of baking have taught him to notice very small signs. Sometimes he listens for the faint, cracking sound that forms as the crust begins to tighten. Sometimes he simply breathes in the smell rising from the oven door. Right now, the scent drifting into the bakery is warm and gentle. At first, it smells like heated dough, but slowly, as the minutes pass, the smell deepens. It becomes rich and nutty, comforting, the smell of bread that is almost ready. The bakery is warm now. The oven has given its heat to the room once again, just as it did the night before. Flour dust floats softly in the light of a small candle resting near the table. Outside the window, the night sky has begun to change. The moon has drifted lower toward the western horizon, and in the east, a very faint, pale color is beginning to appear. Morning is still some distance away, but the darkest hours of night are slowly passing. Thomas opens the oven door carefully. Warm air flows outward into the room. Inside the oven, the loaves have grown round and full. Their surfaces have turned golden brown. Some crusts show small natural cracks where the bread expanded as it baked. Using the long wooden peel, Thomas gently moves one loaf. It slides easily across the stone floor. He lifts it slightly and taps the bottom of the crust. A soft, hollow sound answers. That sound tells him the bread is ready. One by one, the loaves leave the oven. Each loaf is placed onto the wooden cooling racks beside the table. The moment they touch the cooler air of the room, the crust begins to make soft, crackling sounds, tiny whispers of sound as the bread settles. Steam rises faintly from the warm loaves. The smell fills the bakery again. Fresh bread, warm bread, bread that will soon travel into the hands of the waking village. Outside, the sky continues to brighten. The stars are fading now. The pale gray of early dawn stretches slowly across the horizon. A light morning breeze moves gently between the houses, and from a nearby farmyard comes the first quiet crow of a rooster waking for the day. Another rooster answers from farther away. Soon their calls spread across the village like a slow wave. The night is ending. Inside the bakery, Thomas removes the final loaf from the oven. The racks are now full again. Row after row of golden bread rests quietly in the warm air. The oven door closes. Its work for this cycle is finished, but the heat inside the thick bricks will remain for a long time. Sometimes the leftover warmth is used later to bake small pastries or dry herbs. Nothing in the bakery is wasted if it can still serve a purpose. The baker moves slowly along the racks. He adjusts a few loaves so that air can move around them as they cool. The bread must rest for a while before it is ready to carry. If it is taken too soon, the inside remains too soft. So the loaves wait, just as the dough waited earlier in the night. Everything in baking follows a rhythm of patience. The village begins to wake. A door opens down the road. A bucket touches the wooden edge of the well. A cow shifts in its stall. Morning sounds slowly replace the silence of night. The bakery window glows warmly against the cool, early light. And once again, the smell of bread drifts gently along the road. People will soon notice it. They always do. Thomas fills the first basket with warm loaves. He lines the basket with cloth and places the bread carefully inside. Soon, more baskets will follow. In a short while, the first villagers will arrive, just as they did yesterday, and the day before, and many days before that, because every morning in this quiet village begins the same way, with warm bread waiting at the bakery door, bread made during the silent hours while the village slept, bread created through the slow and steady work of the baker and his oven. And as the sun slowly rises once again over the fields and rooftops, the gentle rhythm of the village continues. The baker's night ends, the villager's day begins, and the comforting smell of fresh bread welcomes the morning. Morning spreads gently across the village once more. The sky in the east glows softly with pale gold and light blue. Thin clouds drift slowly above the distant fields, catching the first warm light of the rising sun. The long night has ended, and just as it did the morning before, the bakery is ready. Inside, the rows of bread have cooled enough to carry. The racks that were filled only a short time ago now hold loaves that are warm, firm, and ready for the hands of the villagers. Thomas lifts the first basket and places it on the wooden table near the door. The woven basket is lined with cloth, and the loaves sit inside it like quiet sleeping shapes. Round loaves, long loaves, dark rye loaves, each one baked during the peaceful hours of night. Outside, the village begins its slow awakening. The morning bell from the church rings softly through the cool air, one deep tone, then another. The sound spreads across the rooftops and fields, gently announcing the start of a new day. A farmer walks along the road carrying a wooden tool across his shoulder. He nods toward the bakery window as he passes. Even before stepping inside, he can smell the bread, that warm scent drifting into the morning air, the same scent that has greeted villagers for many generations. Inside the bakery, Thomas opens the wooden door. Fresh morning air flows into the warm room. Sunlight slips across the floor, touching the wooden table and the baskets of bread. The quiet glow of candlelight and oven fire that filled the bakery during the night has now been replaced by the soft light of day. For a moment, the baker stands in the doorway. He watches the village slowly come alive. Children stepping outside their homes, women carrying buckets toward the well, farmers preparing their animals for work in the fields, all of it moving gently without hurry. The first villager soon steps inside. It is the same farmer who passed by moments earlier. He removes his cap and greets the baker with a quiet smile. "Good morning." Thomas nods in return. The farmer chooses a large, round loaf from the basket. The crust still feels slightly warm beneath his hands. He places a few small coins on the table and tucks the bread into a cloth bag before stepping back into the growing daylight. Soon another villager arrives, then another, just as it did yesterday. The bakery slowly fills with soft voices and gentle footsteps. People greet one another quietly. They choose their bread. They carry it home or toward the fields where their work awaits. For many in the village, the day begins with bread from this room. A mother slices a loaf beside a pot of soup. A farmer carries bread into the fields for midday rest. Children tear pieces from the crust as they walk beside their parents. The bread becomes part of many simple moments throughout the day. Yet most of those who eat it never see the long hours of quiet work that came before. The mixing of flour and water, the slow kneading beneath tired hands, the careful tending of the fire, the patient waiting as dough rises and bread bakes, all of it happening while the village slept peacefully. This is why medieval bakers worked through the night, because bread must be ready with the morning. The villagers depend on it. Fresh bread cannot wait until the middle of the day. By sunrise, it must already be baked. So, while the village rests beneath blankets and moonlight, the bakery stays awake. The oven glows. The baker moves quietly between table and fire, night after night, season after season. As the morning continues, the baskets slowly empty again. The warm loaves travel out through the door and into the hands of the villagers. Soon, only a few remain on the racks. The long night of work has once again done its purpose. Thomas moves calmly through the bakery, tidying the table and brushing away the small dusting of flour left behind from shaping the loaves. The oven rests now, its stones cooling slowly after hours of heat. But by evening, the process will begin again. Fresh flour will fill the bowl. Water will be poured. The sourdough starter will wake, and the dough will begin its slow rise once more. The rhythm of the medieval baker never truly ends. It flows like the turning of the seasons, quiet, steady, reliable, night work followed by morning bread followed by daytime rest followed by evening preparation, again and again, for years, for generations. Outside, the village continues its gentle movement through the day. The sun climbs higher, the fields grow bright with light. Voices rise and fade along the road, and somewhere in the distance, a farmer breaks open a loaf of bread baked only hours earlier. The crust cracks softly. Steam drifts upward. He takes a bite while resting beside his field. Simple food, made with patience, made in the quiet hours when the world was asleep. And tonight, when the sun sinks once more behind the hills, when the village grows quiet and candles begin to glow in the windows, one small building will awaken again. The bakery. Its window will shine softly in the darkness. The oven will warm. The smell of bread will slowly fill the night air. And the calm, steady rhythm of the medieval baker will begin once more, helping another peaceful morning arrive with warm bread waiting at the door.